Call the meeting to order. So welcome to the full council meeting on Wednesday, the 20th of November. Welcome to those who've chosen to join us. We won't have people joining us online immediately tonight because we lack the IT, but this will all be recorded and broadcast as soon as possible after the meeting. So welcome to those that have got here. Next item is apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Councillor Hayter. That's the only apology. So as the new way of working, I'll propose that and seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All those in favour? Thank you. Next item is to declare interests. Do we have any declarations of interests?
We've had none pre-notified chairman and no dispensations have been sought for meeting.
Thank you. If anyone recalls any conflict as we go through, flagged up at the time, we'll make an adjudication on it. Thank you. Number 4 is the minutes of the last meeting. So you all had a chance to have a look at the minutes of the last meeting and decide if we agree it is a true and accurate record. Any comments or corrections? No, in that case, I'll propose that we accept them, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All those in favour? Thank you. The next is councillor questions and statements. I see that none have been received so far. That makes sense. The main part of the meeting is obviously going to be the plan, so it makes sense to focus on that. Next, number 6, town mayor's announcements. So it's been a busy month of October, November. Remembrance has been quite high on national and local priorities. I've been to many services at the Nove, on the Esplanade, at the Pavilion, and in some of the local churches. And I think one thing we can say about Weymouth is it does remembrance well, and we do remember. I've also had a lighter time going to the Wow musical at the Pavilion, where they did Marvelous Madness. Another feather in the cap of Weymouth is its proud musical tradition. We really do have great singers and dancers, and many of them that have gone through Wow have gone on to careers in the West End. On a slightly more sour note, I went to the demonstration about the incinerator on the prom last week. That was very well attended. Many hundreds of people there for speeches and a march. Sadly, it's probably a done deal, but the town does not agree with it. In last week, there was one that combined my old career and my new career. There's a diabetes day run by the local NHS at Redlands, where they've had stalls of all the agencies that look after diabetes. So it was a real pleasure to open that one and meet lots of old colleagues and friends and find out the new services which are available for diabetes. A couple of weeks ago, we had the Coastal Forum meeting at the Pavilion. That was quite inspirational. There's some really top-notch speakers from around the southwest and nationally, and it kind of reminds us of what a fantastic place we live in, for one moment. And the other one was the opportunities which still exist by the sea. We get used to it, but there are tremendous opportunities in new technology, in energy generation, for food. In many ways, it constrains us because we're surrounded by three quarters of the site by water, which makes the local plan more difficult. But it is, in many ways, an opportunity for the future. Thank Councillor Nicholson for attending several events that I was only able to get to on my behalf, so thank you very much. And finally, to go in your diary, there are 2 events you might like to attend. The first is Carols by the Coast at 5 o'clock on the 7th of December. That's something that started last year. It was very successful. Salvation Army come on and provide the music. And a more formal event is Thursday, 28th November, 6:30 at St Mary's Church in town, the Civic Carol Service. I hope to see many of you there. Thank you very much. Next item is updates from Dorset councillors. This is a chance for those that aren't served on both councils to bring us any updates from their experience in Dorchester as they are relevant to Weymouth. So I'll throw that open to Dorset County councillors. Any updates? Councillor Dickinson.
Yeah, well, now you've all woken up. I would just like to say that myself and Councillor O'Leary, we visited Trickett Centre Family Hub, because hopefully Littlemore Top Club will be turned into a family hub. So that was a great day out for me and Louis to go and see the fantastic work they do in that centre. I myself personally had an away day with the Harbours Committee, and I went and looked at Lyme Regis and Bridport Harbours are run, and it was fantastic to meet Ed Davis again, who's a fantastic Harbours master.
Ed Davies.
Yeah, sorry. And we had a lovely information session, and that was a fantastic day. Also from the Dorset Coastal Forum, myself, Councillor Harris, and Councillor, where is she? She's there? Yep, Councillor Weather. We met up with the Dorset Green Spaces team and the Weymouth Town Council team, and some excellent work, I hope, is going forward on that matter. And Councillor Harris might want to update us with it, but perhaps another meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other Dorset councillors? Councillor Hope and then Councillor Clifford.
Thank you very much. I'm Councillor Ryan Hope, representing the Western Ward on Dorset Council, also a cabinet member for customer culture and community engagement. Really just want to take this opportunity whilst we've got a full meeting this evening, and to remind colleagues here to really push out that information on encouraging pensioners to check if they're entitled to pension credits. It's still the gateway for many pensioners to get that winter fuel allowance. Even if you're entitled just to a penny of credit, you'll get the winter fuel allowance top up. So please check out the Dorset Council website or Google it, and really encourage your friends, neighbours, anyone you know, your residents, to check if they're entitled to pension credit. There's around 5,000 residents in Dorset who are entitled but not claiming. So I really just want to take this opportunity through my brief to encourage you all to do that and spread that news.
I'm Councillor Simon Clifford, Town Councillor for West and West, and I'm a Dorset Council Cabinet Member for Finance. We had a meeting last night, so we had a lot of evening meetings. They do go on. I hope this one will be as productive as last night. We had a meeting last night which had a couple of important things for the Weymouth area just to be aware of. One of which is the continuing work towards the harbour development. So the latest phase of that was agreed last night. We made a point of asking that Weymouth Town Council and Chickerell Town Council, but Weymouth Town Council in particular, is consulted in advance early and gets full opportunity to have its say on all the proposals coming through. I think that's really important. There was a second item, which was, it's got a sort of posh title, social mobility. What it means is Weymouth and Portland has areas of deprivation. And by deprivation, I mean where individuals don't have the resources, opportunities, skills, educational income to improve their lives. So as a report has come out to try to put some of those areas right, Weymouth and Portland area has a disproportionately high number of people who struggle. to make the best possible lives that they can. And so Dorset Council is doing what it can. It's obviously limited, it's doing what it can, and that was a very important meeting that went ahead. And finally, just a quick update on the state of finances. We, as a Dorset Council, produces its finances in public during the course of January, where it's scrutinised and it's agreed in February. However, we don't get the government settlement figure, i.e. how much money we're going to have from the government until the 19th of December. So at some stage, it'd be really interesting to get people's views on how that works. You wouldn't run a business that way, but the government runs local authorities that way. It's utter madness. It creates an awful lot of work. It's compressed into a short timescale, which I believe means that the scrutiny of the budget isn't as full and comprehensive as it could be. However, we will be very open and transparent, bring everything we can to the public forum. And that was my update. If anyone else wants to take over the mic.
Just a very quick one. My name is Jill Taylor, and I'm councillor for Western Weymouth, and I'm also the cabinet member for Housing and Health. Underneath my cabinet post is community safety and community protection. And I just wanted to highlight, coming up, I haven't got the exact dates because I can't get online here, but on, I believe it's about the 25th of November, is the start of 16 days of action against domestic abuse. This is the time that we highlight domestic abuse and all the forms within it, whether it's violence, whether it's coercive behaviour, because this is just not acceptable. Domestic abuse is actually the highest crime rate within Dorset. And I just hope that everyone will just take a minute and just think about domestic abuse and victims and survivors of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, fellow councillors, for that useful updates, especially important about the domestic abuse. That's really worth highlighting. We move on. Number 8, it's traditionally public question time. This one's slightly different in that we retitled it public participation, make it clearer. A bit about how the council runs, and then I'll give some ideas for how we run the next hour. For those who haven't been to these meetings before, decisions are made in this council by the full council, by all the members, in real time in front of your eyes. There are other models by which councils work. Some work with a all-powerful mayor. While I might like that idea, we do not have that model here. I'm not a very powerful mayor. That's almost like a dictatorship model. It works quite well in some of the big cities. That's not how we work here. I'm purely chairing. Others but work by cabinet, which is a small group of one party that make the major decisions. We don't work like that either. This council works, we will all make the decision in front of your eyes tonight. And it is really worth making points clearly and concisely. I've been to meetings in the last 5 years in the previous council with my mind not made up, and I've been swayed by what I've heard in the evening. So, yeah, clear points. So, a bit going on to what we're going to do in the next hour. So this, just to clarify, this is a meeting in public rather than a public meeting. So you'll have a chance to have your say, but you won't be able to then follow on and intervene later in the meeting. It's a meeting in public. So we have a list of 16 speakers. We've arranged them in blocks to make it easier so that hopefully the arguments presented will follow in some kind of logical or interrelated order. There is a chat show on the BBC Radio 4 called Just a Minute, where you have a minute timer, and the rules are no repetition, no deviation, and no hesitation. We're not going that extreme, but we are following something vaguely similar, we are giving you 3 minutes, not just a minute. But the idea is to present your ideas. If you've got things to say, yeah, okay, put them across. If you hear something said by a previous speaker, it doesn't help to repeat it. It's much better to say something new, because that way the committee here, the council here will hear a wide range of facts they may have considered. So avoiding repetition is one I'd really recommend. So this 3 minutes timer will be started when each person comes to speak. It'll be green to go. As it progresses, it'll go yellow. By the time it goes red, I will ask you to stop. So go have a look at that. So when you see it go yellow, it's time to sum up. Don't feel obliged to speak the full 3 minutes. You could say everything in 1 minute, that's wonderful. So with that said, we will move on to public participation. Town clerk will get ready with we have a microphone which will be brought round to your chair. I'll read out. I've got a list of 16 names. I'll call out the names. So if you put up your hand when your name is called, the microphone will be brought to you. And we won't start the clock until you start speaking. So the first person is Rob Cheeseman.
Okay, I'm speaking in behalf of the Neighbourhood Plan. I'm a resident volunteer on the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group from Weston. I've been on the steering group since the beginning through thick and thin. I joined the steering group in the first place because I was worried about the climate and nature crises. I wanted to ensure that this plan does its utmost to recognise that context in defining the rules for land use across Weymouth. I have to say, I think the plan achieves that because this is also a plan about sustainability, about our environment, and about community resilience in the face of these threats. In achieving that, the job was made easier because such was the strength of feeling on these issues in the public consultations. The plan is able to define 4 overarching sustainability objectives, which are about carbon neutrality, the efficient use of natural resources, the enhancement of biodiversity, and lastly, reducing flood and other climate-related risks and building community resilience. These objectives now pervade the whole plan and its policies and are also further supported by a set of standards and measures used by many planning authorities nationally. The plan has policies covering biodiversity, natural spaces and access to them, walking and cycling, public transport and electric vehicle infrastructure, renewable and community energy schemes, community growing spaces, even sustainable tourism, and of course, sustainable construction. If this plan is supported tonight and in a referendum next year, these policies will have legal standing for many years to come in this town. And if I haven't made my point on sustainability, an assessment of the sustainability credentials of the plan using an independent tool concluded that the plan was, and I quote, probably a case study on how to embed climate and sustainability into a neighbourhood plan. Meanwhile, much focus tonight, I suspect, will be given to development, possibly development in specific areas of our town. Don't get me wrong, we need development. We just need to rethink believing private landowners and developers provide the best solutions. But I urge everyone here to remember the following tonight and when voting next year. In a burgeoning climate crisis, this plan is about using our land sustainably across the whole of our town, for every resident in every community. In the mid-2030s, when this plan will still be valid, residents in their 20s will be looking for affordable homes in safe and sustainable communities. These residents are the 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds of today. But these guys will not be able to vote in the referendum next year. In fact, those young people didn't vote for these councillors here tonight, who will vote on their behalf on the plan very shortly.
15 seconds.
Please do the right thing for our young people and the whole town and endorse the neighbourhood plan tonight. Thank you.
2 seconds to spare. Well done. The next speaker is Penny Quilter.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Penny. I'm a resident in the Rodwell area of Weymouth, and I've been a volunteer member of the steering group since its inception, and the process began in 2020. I put myself forward, similar to Rob, to help in the plan making process because I care about the community here, and it seemed a good way to address broader concerns about climate change. I'm speaking briefly about flooding and sewage pollution tonight, matters that are not unique to our town, but are significant in relation to land use. The eventual release of the Level 2 Strategic Flood Risk Assessment has informed some of our recent work and will be reflected in amendments to the section of the plan entitled the Strategic Context. This Level 2 flood assessment was restricted to geographical areas of economic importance in the town centre area, but does not detract from the potential impact of flood events across residential districts, which is a sobering thought. Mitigation relies on the funding and delivery of all the planned sea defences for the town. In trying to understand more about flooding and sewage pollution, I and others have met with Wessex Water personnel, been on a conducted visit of the treatment works at White Regis pumping station. Increasing periods of heavy rainfall and a system that combines rainfall and sewage is the principal reason for regular pollution incidents, or spills, as the water industry prefers to call them. This in no way excuses Wessex Water for its lack of forward planning and a failure to invest and upgrade water infrastructure. This is a massive issue nationally and is beyond the scope of our neighbourhood planning. We do, however, acknowledge the concern of local people. Policies WMP 33 and 34 address the delivery of infrastructure and sustainable development, respectively. In addition, I'd like to mention the role of the supporting environmental targets that Rob has just alluded to. These are highlighted in green boxes throughout the plan to encourage everyone to go beyond regulatory minimums and aspire to best practice standards and help us all in the transition to a zero carbon future. The targets support 4 cross-cutting plan objectives, as Rob pointed out, for environmental sustainability that underpin every policy within the plan. The second objective, resource efficiency, and the fourth objective, climate change, cover issues related to flooding and water pollution. For example, there are targets for water usage, routing rainwater away from the sewerage system, incorporating suitable, sustainable drainage systems and designs for the recycling of grey water. I ask councillors to consider the wider good of Weymouth in their deliberations this evening. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, Paul Barber.
Hi, good evening. I'm Paul Barber, resident, and I'm a member of the steering group, and I voted against the neighbourhood plan in last year's Reg 14 consultation. I've been involved with the neighbourhood plan since it started in 2020, and a member of the Home Theme Group since 2022. More recently, I responded to an invitation to join the steering group, joining in July of this year, on the basis of being involved with amending the plan, emphasising that I was not prepared to just rubber stamp the first draft. My principal objection is the allocation of valuable green space for housing, notably at White Collar, where there are several issues and Redlands. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the need for affordable homes, particularly social housing. I just don't think we're going about it in the right way. Overall, the plan has largely been created in isolation, without looking at Dorset's strategic requirements in detail and with insufficient engagement with Dorset Council. We have not been mindful of adjacent developments, in particular the 500 houses at Bingham and the 400 houses at Southwood under Wave 15 of the draft local plan. In 2021, the Town Council submitted the following comment to that draft. This challenges the total number of houses needed in the area and reinforces the need for us to develop a plan for the South Ridgeway conurbation. Looking at the area as a whole also means that overdevelopment on the Green Corridor between Chickerell and Weymouth can be managed more effectively, such as excluding Wave 14. And yet Wave 14, or Redlands by another name, is in the current neighbourhood plan. There has also been a failure to fully take into account the move to embrace community land trusts and an awareness that the current market-led approach to delivering affordable homes just does not work. The overarching national planning policy framework is not expected until next year, and the local plan not until 2026-27. And yet the neighbourhood plan has pressed on without regard to likely changes, risking being out of date before it's published. The amendments already identified include the parish boundary change introduced in April and the soon to be out of date Weymouth Town Centre master plan. Finally, let's get to the Reg 14 consultation.
30
results.
seconds.
From here, 288 returns from a population of 53,000, with 147 for the plan and 141 against. The low return and almost equal split for and against must raise questions of the overall support and whether it's representative. But on to the good news.
I'm just, 10 seconds.
It's recently announced that the 5-year housing supply has been satisfied until November next year. So what am I suggesting? 2 options. 1, pause the plan and rethink. Or 2, publish but without green space allocation. And if
That's it, thanks. Here. Speaker is Michael Bennett.
Good evening. I joined the steering group because my interest in housing is very personal. I work as a volunteer for an international charity, and twice during my lifetime, I have faced potential homelessness. It leaves a scar. Housing faces an unparalleled crisis. We are faced with serious overcrowding, unacceptably long waiting lists, substandard accommodation, and chronic shortages of really affordable housing, and both rented and social. Ladies and gentlemen, as a community, we have to set aside our individual comfort zones. And to this end, I urge councillors to support this balanced plan going forward to Dorset for further consultation, examination, and ultimate referendum. We cannot wait much longer.
Thank you. Laura Wood.
Good evening. My name is Laura Wood, and I'm a member of the Weymouth Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, and have been since the beginning in 2021. My motivation to be on the steering group has always been the belief that Weymouth is a fantastic place to live, to work, and to bring family up in. Concept of the neighbourhood plan, protecting and addressing the future decisions, is one that I believe in. Very early on in the Weymouth neighbourhood plan, the steering group felt it was crucial to consult not only with adults but with young people. I contacted all 18 learning establishments within the area. Of those 18, 4 primary schools, 1 secondary school and 1 college became involved in the engagement process. This kind of engagement is not always evident in neighbourhood plans and offers a unique insight into the Weymouth younger people's ideas, which is crucial. As an ex-teacher, I was very happy to visit the students in their schools to gather their ideas and their future needs. Consequently, in 2022, over 500 young people aged from 9 years to 18 years, so those people that are going to be needing things in Weymouth, were asked about what they wanted to see in the future. Their thoughts took the form of written and drawn ideas covering all of the 5 neighbourhood plan themes: homes, jobs, communities, green spaces and environment. Many of the students' ideas and opinions were incredibly insightful and mature and have been represented within the policies of the Weymouth neighbourhood plan. Suggestions included better cycle paths to school,
fitting solar panels to new and existing homes, and minimising loss of trees and hedges during developments. All of these items are included in the plan. Whilst there may be aspects of the plan that many of us might not agree with here today, we as adults should really remember who the plan is going to affect most. The next generation, not about us.
Yeah.
Development at homes is not the only element of Weymouth Neighbourhood Plan. There are 4 other key things that have really positive impacts on the Weymouth area, which I believe will help to preserve the special setting that Weymouth offers.
30 seconds, that's it. We're done. Just battling with this machine, with the timer at the top is working fine, but the flasher sometimes comes on slightly early. So anyway, we're back in business. Graham Perry.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, councillors. I was for a short time on the steering committee, but I'm just here tonight, my views as a resident of Rodwell. Preparing a neighbourhood plan for such a large area was always going to be a huge challenge, but I do think it was the right thing to do. Breaking it down into smaller units would have involved probably more work overall, and potentially we'd end up with some sort of old patchwork. And Weymouth is a single community, so it needs a single plan. However, this large area has produced problems with engagement, and I fear it may still be a problem when it comes to the referendum. Indeed, initial engagement was poor, and as has been suggested, the first draft wasn't great. However, it's good to see that so much of the feedback on that draft has now been taken into account. The plan still paints a rather depressing picture of the future. Lots of new houses, but barely any space for additional employment or new tourist facilities. And while there are lots of sustainable details, I have to differ with Rob and Penny. The plan isn't particularly environmentally friendly. If we are bringing all these people in without providing employment, then either they're non-economically active or they're all going to have to commute to Dorchester and beyond. We started off talking about things called 15-minute neighbourhoods where people could work and shop in the same area. None of that is here. This is turning Weymouth into a dead dormitory town. It also seems that North Quay, St Nicholas Street and possibly Jubilee Sidings could be lost to high density housing. And if these are sold off as individual freehold units, they're like Chapelway Heights, we're stuck with them in perpetuity. Apart from the obvious flood risks, where in the future will we be able to find space for new wet weather attractions, employment or transport infrastructure? And the really big problem that I think the town faces, certainly the life of the town faces, is how people will access it in the future. The plan refers to a reinvigorated Mount Pleasant Park and Ride, which is great, but it won't help the increasing populations of Chickerell and Portland, who view Weymouth as their town centre. It won't help the increasing number of cruise ship visitors. It doesn't help yachtsmen and divers who want to use the harbour. And most significantly, it won't help our increasing elderly population and our limited mobility. However, I accept that some of this is outside the scope of the plan, and although there are some changes I'd still like to see at Reg 16, I have been persuaded that it's better to have a plan than no plan. So I'd like to say a big thank you to David Collins and the team for the incredible amount of work they've put in. The plan isn't great, but that is because of the totally absurd housing targets that have been set by higher panels. And hopefully this plan will mitigate some of the damage resulting from those targets. Thank you.
Speaker.
Absolutely.
Maxine Foster.
Good evening, I'm Maxine Foster from Weymouth Civic Society. The Civic Society is grateful to everyone who's put huge amounts of time and effort into producing this neighbourhood plan, and we support a range of features. These include the policies for safeguarding the landscape and the small local green spaces, the heritage of historic buildings, and the many environmental considerations. And we especially support the provision of affordable homes. It's good to see there have been further improvements made to the plan in response to comments from the public. And we are pleased that some of the important additional views and the panorama that we suggested are now included. We do have concerns about the amount of further residential accommodation required, especially as there are also very large areas of new housing with the extra 500 homes north of Littlemore and the 340 off Nottington Lane, as well as the continuing expansion of Chickerell and other areas. There are very limited areas of open land within the neighbourhood plan, and it's most unfortunate further development will involve fields and green spaces. We've always been concerned about the threatened loss of car parks in Weymouth Town Centre, so we are pleased that the proposed changes in the emphasis in policy WNP 32 to say that redevelopment proposals will not be supported unless criteria are met. The town centre car parks are busy, well used and support employment in the town. They are vital to provide good access for customers, for shops and businesses, churches, hospitality providers, and for the future prosperity of the town centre. They are also especially important for the many older and disabled people who live in Weymouth and the surrounding areas. Without convenient access these car parks provide, people will increasingly desert Weymouth Town Centre for other shopping areas where parking is easy and free. So we're pleased to see some changes have been made in response to feedback, which have made improvements to the plan. We also congratulate the team achieving a difficult task of putting it together.
Thank you. David Berry.
I congratulate the steering group on producing a comprehensive plan, which when made will help Weymouth develop in the way the local people want it to. The adopted local plan includes SUS 5 neighbourhood development plan policy that needs to be met. One of its requirements is to demonstrate the plan is achievable. The company's advice states that the neighbourhood plans have two aspects of achievability. The first is to ensure the necessary infrastructure will be in place to support the development. Also, the 2001 local plan consultation had a neighbourhood plan policy DEM 9, where it says the plan should identify the infrastructure needed to support it. The Wall neighbourhood plan is currently with the examiner. It has detailed evidence about specific infrastructure requirements for Wall. Apart from the green infrastructure, the Weymouth plan has no such infrastructure evidence, including that needed for 400 new homes at White Colliver and Redlands Farm outside the current development boundary. Also, to my knowledge, there has not been a full current Weymouth infrastructure, nor the infrastructure required to support the already approved developments in the plan area, such as the 340 homes being built by C.G. Fry & Sons at Nottingham Park, of which Redlands Farm will use the same access roads, as well as developments at the plan boundaries of Chickerell and Binkham. The second aspect is viability. The latest viability report identifies White Colliver and Redlands Farm just about viable at 50% affordable housing. There's been no contact with the landowners and developers to validate these calculations as recommended by locality. The viability report does not take account of any issues such as flooding, sewage constraints and sloping sites, nor those identified by site surveys, for example, geotechnical investigations conducted by Fry's 2022. Fry's response to the Regulation 14 consultation included the 50% requirement could have serious implications for delivery and development. For many reasons, they strongly disagree with the 50% allocation of the 150 homes at Redlands Farm and wanted it changed to 35% as per the emerging local plan. That's likely what we will get. It's also disappointing that the 2024 updated strategic environment assessment has not yet been published on the website. Dorset Council Regulation 14 response recommended additional evidence for all sites, specifically for Redland, further work to show the likely visual impact of development, that satisfactory access can be delivered, a drainage strategy required to manage flooding, site constraints are investigated and coordinated.
30 seconds.
These issues are important concerns of all the local residents and all sites. Dorset Council confirmed that the site recommendations were to be completed before neighbourhood plan is made. but the steering group decided to leave it to the later planning application. This is a very significant omission in evidence, and you should provide it, or get the developer to provide it, either before submission to Dorset Council or before the Regulation 16 consultation starts, so Weymouth residents can comment. It's a big decision for you to submit one of the largest David plans in the country to Dorset Council. You need to be sure you have the robust evidence and take it on at Dorset Council advice.
Lovely.
Sorry to interrupt your meeting. I have using the leisure center and there is a car parked stopping me from going home. It's parked in a place where it's marked as a no parking area. So is it okay if I ask if anyone owns a white BMW with the number plate OY19MLJ? White BMW.
I wish.
Yeah, reception sent me here.
Not the mayor's.
No.
Okay, really sorry to interrupt.
Thanks.
The mayor's going to be next.
Yes. That speech was excellent. Bang on the 3 minutes. So well done. That was a really good time. Sally may not be speaking up. Or they no. Right, we move on. Andrew Ninner.
Good morning. I'm Andrew Nineham, I'm a resident of Preston. The dictionary definition of neighbourhood is a district or community within a town or city, and Weymouth is a town. And it comprises of about 7 or 8 distinct communities or neighbourhoods. In the main, each has its own school, church, community centre, local shops and amenities. And of course, there's the town centre area, which we all benefit from. Once the steering group had decided on its objectives, there was a handful of poorly publicised meetings and a tick box survey asking very generalised questions. There was no or little or no specific consultation with individual neighbourhoods. It was clear that the steering group had already made decisions which would form the basis of the emerging plan. The steering group was always opposed to smaller plans, and that can be demonstrated by the well-publicised criticism of the Southern Points plan by 2 members of the steering group. Later, it became apparent that the development area proposed for Preston could accommodate about 500 houses. And this was not a figure within the emerging plan, but one based on common sense and previous proposals. This figure was dismissed by the steering group as lies, and the resulting 573 comments from local residents was ignored, being alleged misleading information. Such was the feeling within the steering group that they asked the Dorset Council to sanction councillors responsible for suggesting the 500 house figure. But thankfully, Dorset Council refused. As we now know, the proposed figure was in fact in excess of 500 houses. My point is that the steering group did not listen or comply or consult properly with the people of Weymouth. Instead of building a plan based on the wishes and views of the community, it felt very much as if the steering group had decided what they wanted and would bulldoze their vision through, come what may. Now, thankfully, the Regulation 14 consultation appears to have been considered properly.
30 seconds.
I'd like to ask that the steering group in future apply the principles of consultation well laid down to consult before you make up your mind. Avoid relying solely on surveys. Offer alternative to surveys such as discussion forums and publish clear outcomes which demonstrate conscientious consideration. Something, ladies and gentlemen, I would ask the steering group to consider in the future. Thank you very much.
Bailey.
Alex.
Alex.
We tried, Jack. Thank you so much. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Bailey, not Alec Bailey, local resident to the area. So a key driver of the Weymouth neighbourhood plan is the number of people on the Weymouth Housing Register, rather than the broader Dorset Council area. However, the tables and draft plans September 2023 and August 2024 lack source references and appear overstated compared to a March 2024 Dorset Echo article up to 500 apply to Dorset Council for housing every month, and FOI data published by Dorset Council in April and November of 2024. In addition, there is no supporting information about the extra 416 applications in September 2023, preferring Weymouth and used later in a draft. They could be regarded as exceptions, but if so, there is no information about their type of application, their banding or room requirements. Some councils allow applicants with no connection to join their register, but Dorset Council does not. Dorset Council requires evidence of a local connection unless an applicant qualifies under the exceptions of Section 14 of the Housing Association Allocation Policy. In March 2024, Dorset Echo reported that Dorset Council received 500 housing applications monthly. An FOI DC-7251 revealed that 226 of these were exceptions in February 2024, while a later FOI DC-8374 showed 430 applicants on October 2024, with no exceptions recorded. Given this, Weymouth totals 959 and 1,166 don't align with the Dorset Echo article or FOI data, which reported 500 monthly applications with local connections, and that's important. These figures are puzzling, as Weymouth is just a subset of Dorset Council. Comparing the data for September 2023 and August 2024 shows a 207 application increase, driven entirely by no local connection cases, while local connection applications actually dropped by 30. Without a comparison table in the pre-submission, it's clear this increase is driven by low-need applicants with no local ties, implying that if we build, they will come from outside of Dorset.
30 seconds.
Yeah, so I'll just summarise. These discrepancies cast doubt on the accuracy of the data and its impact on Weymouth's housing strategy, raising the risk of gaslighting our community. And my question, although it's rhetorical, how can you produce a plausible housing plan based on these representative figures? And who is driving this document? The people of Weymouth or the steering group and their partners?
Sorry for getting you.
Oh, it's all right.
Next speaker, John Baldwin.
Good evening, John Baldwin, resident. I'd like to address the topic of viability, especially with regard to the Wyke Oliver development site. When spelled with a capital V, this subject of viability is a dry financial exercise, and in this case was conducted by a consultant who doesn't even say if he visited the site. It's perhaps really no surprise he ponders over why Wyke Oliver is so comparatively low in housing density. His 59-page report doesn't consider particular difficulties with the sites, in fact any of the sites. Last year he said the Budmouth site was not viable. The steering group said that they would tweak the report on that. And in fact, it is this latest release, it is viable, but has been dropped anyway. Buried on page 41 of the report is a pragmatic view by the consultant, which is important. He says none of the development sites are viable with an overall delivery of 44% of affordable housing. That 44% figure contravenes both Weymouth's own policy and is the recent confirmation from Angela Rayner that it's 50% minimum, I say minimum, for greenfield development. What happens in the real world when viability is spelled with this lowercase b. Dorset Council said the original plan was not viable, achievable or deliverable. The CEO of East Borough Housing Association has written to you, and he said it would not be viable even if the land were to be purchased free of charge. He runs a real business, and I'm sure he's at the sharp edge of the real world. Are builders in the real world? Well, the developer of Wyke Oliver hasn't put in the plan that his actual assessment is £100 profit on a turnover of 70 million. And that's before considering all the impracticalities of the site. Note that in the Reg 14, this developer is careful to avoid any commitment to 50% affordable housing. And without this, it's all meaningless. Dorset Council only want 20 to 30% of affordable housing. Dinkley Park might deliver that on an ideal site, but there's no way Wyke Oliver will in this difficult hilly terrain. Noting the very high risk around Wyke Oliver cannot achieve 50% affordable housing, consider Curtis Fields, where, as we know, the developers have appealed against the figures they agreed with the planners. Next, the developers could appeal to the national government, but the planners may not want to risk 50k of public money in order to fight that appeal. Just look at the incinerator. Councillors, in the interest of having a real world plan, can we make sure we address all of these aspects with due consideration? Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Dan Hastings, I'm a resident. I want to talk tonight about the Strategic Environment Assessment Report. You've had the 112 page report for more than a year. It's extremely important, but page 12 of your agenda tonight says the update is missing. The SEA is the reason given by the steering group for taking Budmouth-Brackendale out, but leaving Wyke Oliver in the plan. I'm concerned that you're being asked to vote tonight on something you haven't actually seen. Now, these two sites were always just one field, if you refer to the history and Way 14. It was divided into two fields because different developers got involved. Bellway for Budmouth and Morrish Homes for Wyke Oliver. Now, the SEA report shows 8 criteria, including things like community well-being as an environmental consideration. It's extremely important. Budmouth scored 4 red flags out of 8 criteria, with 2 neutrals and 2 don't know. Wyke Oliver scored 1 red flag, 1 neutral, but a massive 6 don't knows. This was all more than a year ago. So how does one part of a field score a red flag for biodiversity and geodiversity, and another part of this field scored don't know? How does one part of a field score a red flag for community well-being, and another part of this field scored don't know? And how does one part of the field score a red flag for transportation, and another part of the field score don't know? And so on and so on. Now, if the steering group don't know for more than a year and haven't found out, how can it be put forward into this critical plan? Sometimes don't know means don't know, but that's not a good enough reason to just plough on. That is the approach that was taken by the Titanic, and this is a disaster that needs to be reviewed. Yeah.
Ian Barnes.
Good evening. I'm a resident of Wyke Oliver Close. My property adjoins the proposed farm site. In July of this year, I wrote a detailed letter to the steering group outlining all the technical difficulties of the site and why it has not been developed over the past 30 years of trying. I received the confirmation that my letter had been given to the steering group. On 10th October 21, the steering group did a walkabout to include Wyke Oliver site. They walked up Oaktree Drive and they turned right into Wyke Oliver Road. They then walked away from the site and did not view it. It's hard now to understand why they've included it in the plan without even viewing it, and without at least challenging what I wrote in great detail. In the close, we flood regularly. As long ago as the 1980s, the farm wall of the farm had to be demolished because of the weight of water building up behind it. That caused a flood to the surrounding properties. Now, before this area was called Preston, it was called Seven Springs. Look at any old maps. There is a reason for that. Everyone talks about SUDS. This means Sustainable Drainage System. What it really means is to hold back floodwater for long enough for it to infiltrate into the ground. There is no infiltration here. Once the surface is saturated, water runs off in sheets. All reports given to you confirm we are on clay. Please bear in mind that climate change is real. Weymouth has recently experienced rainfall which exceeded all rainfall records ever recorded. Not just exceeded, but exceeded by 30%. Please think on what just happened in Spain. The developer has not referred to water or to flooding once in his Reg 14 submission, but residents have had site meeting with the LLFA, Dorset Council Flooding Team, and they have confirmed that recent changes to policy brought on by climate change now mandate that sites must show they can cope with rainfall 45% greater than today.
30 seconds.
My main gripe is that Moorish Homes have said nothing about dealing with this. Why? Because demonstrably they can't. Residents have been in constant contact with Western Water. Preston Brook comes under their remit, and they have said not a drop more of man-induced water can go into this as it already floods. Acts of God still okay. You need to reconsider White Oliver as a suitable site for development.
That will be timing, right on the 3 minutes. Sarah Smith.
Good evening, everyone. I am a resident of Preston, and I would like to talk about flooding and sewerage. The historical flooding at White Oliver is well known. White Oliver can only drain into the Preston Brook. You'll have read Regulation 14 from Dorset Council, and I quote, "There is a significant constraint in the form of a long stretch of downstream culvert." The Regulation 14 from White Oliver developer Moorish Homes is careful, of course, as we've heard, not to mention flooding at all. But they say they want to increase the bill from 250 to a whopping 270 houses. Houses in roads such as Mellstock Avenue have been flooded in the past from the brook. The brook empties into Lodmore Marshes, as we've heard, which is already a Zone 3 flood risk. We have just also received a scientific evidence that by 2030, which is only 6 years ago, ahead I should say, Preston Beach Road could be underwater, along with the marshes, and I would think Southdown Avenue as well. So why does the plan not talk about this? The Regulation 14 from the Environment Agency says, and I quote, "We have highlighted that the evidence of the SFRA L2 demonstrates that if in the future the necessary flood risk management infrastructure cannot be delivered, the overall sustainability of the community will be compromised. Therefore, we have recommended that they could highlight this matter now." Councillors, now means now. Why does the plan only deal with town centre flooding as far as Green Hill? The Regulation 14 runs on with R16, which may or may not be the Environment Agency because it's not identified. It says for White Oliver, and I quote, The area's green spaces play a significant role in flood alleviation. So why are there proposals to develop on them? There's no mention of flooding from rainwater runoff, which will only get worse if these developments are approved. This is not a neighbourhood plan for Preston. We cannot lose Preston Beach Road, which is a main arterial road into Weymouth. Equally, we cannot accept the prospect of Southdown Avenue suffering from flooding.
30 seconds.
In short, White Oliver can only worsen what is already a dire prospect for us, and it needs to be reviewed. We've already heard about Wessex Water tonight, but I will add that I do swim off of Preston Beach, as many others do as well, and I don't really value the prospect of more sewerage going into that. Equally, the station which manages the sewerage, which is on Lodmore, will actually be underwater as well by 2030.
Thank you. Then Van der Pass.
Councillors, the 7 Preston speakers tonight have mandated their people as expressed in public meeting 48 hours ago. Councillor Harris was there. I tried to engage with the steering group on behalf of the people, but they won't. I invited them to a site meeting to understand local knowledge of sites because they didn't visit on the walkabout in 2021. They declined. Instead, my efforts to help the steering group in their work gets me outed in the Echo by Councillor Harris as a NIMBY. I don't expect that treatment from my council. You previously voted down the Southern Points MP, but then allowed it to go forward. You voted last October to let the Weymouth draft go forward against your own declared policies, but then you probably didn't know that. Ask me to tell you more. The mandate you voted on derived from 34 people out of 55,000, which is 0.06% of the people. You've broken the Nolan Gunning principles, which is why I have prepared an application to the High Court for judicial review. I don't know how much of this latest draft and 92 appendices you've had time to absorb since it was delivered just 7 days ago. Some appendices even later, some are still missing. Look in your agenda. I hope you have done due diligence. I say to you that it will be unsafe for this draft to go forward after the information shared this evening. Councillors, the destiny of Weymouth until at least 2038 is in your hands, and this is the most important thing you will do during your tenure. Please, please don't vote in your usual political blocks tonight. Remember, neighbourhood plans are bottom up from the people and not top down from the politicians. A great deal of good work has gone into the plan by many unsung heroes over 5 years. Yes, it is regrettable that the flagship Lincoln policy of affordable housing is not viable, deliverable, or achievable. Those are the words from Dorset Council, not me. Take White Oliver Farm out and let the plan go forward with the blessing of Preston. Let them vote down the plan at referendum. I'm open to questions, and a hard copy of what we've said is available. Thank you.
For that, it is quite hard. The 3 minutes this is the first I've been on the delivery end of it. I've been on the receiving end of it many times at the council, and it is quite a it's quite hard to do things in 3 minutes. So well done for getting your points across within the time available.
We practiced.
Yeah, that's the trick. Yeah, you practice in front of a mirror with a stopwatch. That's the way to do it. So thank you, one all. Thank you to the public. I say we won't be able to answer every question. Hopefully, councillors around the table will have heard some of the points that may pick them up in discussion. So we will now move forward. So we're going to item 9, which is introduce a neighbourhood plan. I'm proposing to divide this up somewhat. I'll let Councillor David Northern and Colin Marsh introduce the item. I'm going to ask them to be timely. I will intervene. I'll give you slightly longer. I'll give you 5 minutes each. Then I'll ask you to stop. At that point, we'll stop for technical questions. If there's any specific facts or figures that don't make sense, we'll make use of the opportunity of having the steering group and Hilary Jordan from Dorset Council here to answer any precise questions on planning and such. I've seen that done in planning committees in Dorset Council. At that point, we will then move to just the councillors. So the debate will then start, and that will just be among councillors. We won't be going back to members of the steering group. That will just be within councillors. When we get to that point, again, it's fair if everyone has an opportunity to state their views. Again, try and keep it to roughly 3 minutes. I won't be too exact, but try and keep it to 3. And do try and give opportunities for all councillors to speak. I know in some meetings some councillors speak repeatedly, others don't speak at all. I'd like to make sure that there's opportunity. If you've spoken once, then give way to others that haven't spoken, please. Hopefully we'll get a chance to put our views across and consider. So, with no further ado, I'll ask Councillor Northern and Colin Marsh to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I have 5 minutes. I can't respond to all those things that were said earlier, and I'd like some opportunity to do that afterwards. What I have prepared is to introduce the item to the councillors, not respond to those comments at that instance. So I'll start, if I may, to go through that now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Chair of the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, together with Colin Marsh, the Vice Chair, we want to report the progress on the plan and recommend approval to submit the plan to the next and final stage of the process, which will be managed by Dorset Council. We assume that councillors and interested members of the public have read the words in the agenda and reference the plan, the consultation statement and the basic conditions. The Town Council agreed to create a plan in June 2020. Thanks to former councillor Lucy Hamilton, who led the early work. She ensured that this was undertaken by a steering group comprising 6 residents and 4 councillors. Thanks to the members of the steering group who have already spoken as residents. We listed in the forward of the plan all the people who have contributed to the plan, and also the residents who attended events. I'd also like to thank the residents who attended events and responded to our surveys. This is summarised in the consultation statement, one of the 3 mandatory documents for a neighbourhood plan. Our first survey was responded to 424 people. What came back loud and clear was that people valued living in Weymouth, as you've heard from others. 2 priorities for improvement stood out. Diverse employment opportunities, 96% of those people said that, and affordable local housing, 93% of people said that was needed. From this, we drafted a vision for the plan along with aims. Given the emphasis on affordable housing, we commissioned a housing needs analysis, started a call for sites from landowners, and subsequently conducted a site assessment. The consultation describes all the public engagement activities and statutory consultation that has taken place. This is summarised on page 3 of the agenda. On page 4, we list additional evidence we have sought to the plan.
As a result of the feedback comments, we have modified what was presented in the pre-submission plan. This is described in the summary of changes to policies document. Extracts from this have been included on page 5 and 6 of the agenda. The benefits of the plan are on page 7 in the agenda. It was this document that provided the summary used by the Echo today in their coverage. Good coverage. Read page 1, page 4 and page 5. Because of the concern over allocating 2 adjacent sites in Preston and the negative impacts in the strategic environment assessment, we no longer allocate the Budworth Avenue site. Further, we've changed the land use to leisure on the mid and southern parts of Lodmore Tip site. We've balanced the loss of greenfield sites by gaining landowner commitment to transfer of adjacent land totaling 32 hectares to published ownership, which ensures that habitat enrichment can take place and the green gaps between settlements are secured. Our residential allocations are supported by viability. The report demonstrates, and read the latest report, not old ones, that they are all viable. This includes consideration of developers' costs, including 20% profit. We've only been able to allocate 2 sites for employment use, the extension to Jubilee sidings and a small site in the northern part of Lodmore Tip, owned by Dorset Council. We support the public's desire to see development prioritised on brownfield sites in the town centre. These are already allocated for mixed development in the existing local plan, so out of the scope of the neighbourhood plan. As a steering group, we had to keep up with many ministerial statements and changes to the national planning policy framework. We've had clear advice from Dorset Council that changes to policy will take time and we need to progress the plan against the current NPPF and the existing local plan ahead of the emerging Dorset local plan. You may ask, who approves the Weymouth plan? It is the public engagement which has given the plan direction, aims and objectives. The steering group who have developed the policies to achieve these objectives. These have been refined and modified following comments from residents and statutory authorities. Comments can be made next year on the revised plan. The independent examiner will decide whether these comments are valid and whether the plan is legally sound and deliverable. They will recommend changes to the plan, which we are obliged to accept. The plan will be revised, and in a referendum, the residents of Weymouth vote to approve the plan. It is the residents who approve the plan. Without a Weymouth plan, there is a risk that when Dorset Council failed to meet the government's new targets in the 5 years supply test, developers will be able to develop land outside the defined development boundary. When the neighbourhood plan is made, developers will have to follow its policies as well as the existing local plan. If Dorset Council fails to meet the housing supply test, developers will still need to meet the Weymouth plan policies as our plan addresses a housing need by allocating sites. This will continue for 5 years. Given all this, it's important to proceed with the Weymouth neighbourhood plan, submit it to Dorset Council in December and make this plan in 2025. This will ensure we get the development Weymouth needs and not the development which developers want and where they want it. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Colin.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity in my capacity as a resident member. Sorry. As a resident member and vice chair of the steering group to address councillors here today. I first became involved in the project following the decision of this town council in 2020 to amalgamate the main Southern Points plan with the proposed Weymouth plan, and they agreed at that stage to respect and include the Southern Points policies. A glance at Appendix D will recognise on the basis of evidence that that commitment has been honoured. And indeed, many of those policies are more robust as a result of this process. If it is to succeed, a neighbourhood plan needs to be positive and land use focused with regard to future development. Ensuring a balance between identifying land which is needed for housing, employment and leisure, and that which should be protected for future generations, whether as wildlife habitat or for recreational use, is important. Given the diverse views, even in a small neighbourhood area, and noting that Weymouth is indeed one of the largest nationally, the reality is that compromise is necessary if we are to move forward together for a better future for all. Whilst acknowledging the inevitable and understandable focus on site allocations for development, I ask you not to overlook the policies which contribute to achieving balance. Consider that, consistent with the bottom-up approach that the steering group has chosen to adopt, early public feedback identified just how much local people value Weymouth's green, heritage and wildlife habitat. Landscape and green space policies 1 to 13 demonstrate our absolute commitment to deliver on that feedback. In terms of wildlife, that means not blanket protection, but independent, competent assessment of developable land in relation to both habitat and species, and the application of mitigations which are appropriate and proportionate to the assessed risk to biodiversity as demonstrated by W3 to 6 policies. A balanced approach again. The pandemic significantly raised awareness of the importance of access to open green space and the need to protect this for future development. The 49 areas totaling 60 hectares proposed for protection have all been identified by the public, every one of them, and evaluated against strict national criteria. In that respect, I'm particularly grateful for the help from former Councillor Colin Huckle and from Councillors Peter Dickinson and Louis O'Leary for their help in familiarising ourselves in arranging site meetings. The protection of green space is extended by the incidental open spaces policy, and I'm grateful again for councillors who've contributed to that review. And the policies maintaining the identity and character of the individual neighbourhoods by preventing urban sprawl. The Green Gaps policy is an example of that. As the Chair has explained, even where we have had to very reluctantly allocate on greenfield sites, then we have ensured not only that there is a protection of green land, of green space, but that we've actually chosen to ensure that the criteria need to protect that in terms of transfer of ownership and of a maintenance agreement funded by the developer for the future. So from a planning perspective, I suggest that this provides potentially the highest level of protection achievement. As well as that, we have recognised the blue infrastructure that's important to people and to wildlife in terms of the Riversides policy, and I'm grateful to the input from members of the Riverways Society in this respect. Earlier, colleagues on the steering group commented on the broader sustainability, environmental sustainability aspects, and they also contribute to the policies in this plan significantly. In a large neighbourhood area, it's important that the smaller communities must be as policy specific as possible. And I refer to the spread on policies of local green space, community buildings, the pubs, sports and recreation facilities. And you see that that is representative across where they are named. So as a steering group, we sought balance and recognise the need to compromise on this. Compromise is necessary if this plan is to be representative of the needs of Wales as a whole. So I ask that councillors to look at it holistically, appreciate the overall benefits that policies offer to those they represent, as well as to the wider Wales community, and consider that on balance, this plan merits their support. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to move into a section where you can, this is for councillors now, if there's any technical questions you want to ask of the steering group and individual different planning in Dorset Council. Any precise technical questions, or should we move late?
Hi, so I've got two grown-up daughters, both of whom live away and would dearly like to come back and live in Weymouth in due course when they want to start a family. I just wanted to ask how the plan will help families renting in the private sector.
To know whether that's a technical one or want to answer about the plan later in debate. Is it one you can answer technically?
Technically, yeah. It's a good question. The 2021 census showed that 20% of homes are in Weymouth are in private rent and only 14% in social housing. So it's very relevant. There are high rents in Weymouth in the private rented sector for social housing, they are high. The neighbourhood plan can't directly change this. The housing needs assessment identifies that for many families on lower incomes, housing benefit is needed to make renting affordable, and for households on mean incomes can only afford entry-level rentable homes. What the neighbourhood can do is to ensure that new homes built in the town centre are not for holiday let or second homes. We have the policy W31 principal residency. Increasing the supply may impact further increases in prices. The Weymouth local connection policy should apply to new build affordable homes like either from first home discounts or shared ownership. And the buying part of that will be available to people not on the housing as the waiting list. It is difficult, except by saying that by relieving that pressure, by making sure there are enough people receiving affordable homes, then you will release some of the pressure that's on the private rented sector and prices will hopefully go. But that's a hope, but I'm not sure what else we can do. Thank you.
This is becoming moving into debate. We'll let Councillor Taylor go, but we tried to see it. Technical questions. It's a legal or a procedural question.
Please feel free to block this question. It's actually a question for Hilary Jordan. I wonder if you could explain to us how sites that are potentially going to flood are dealt with through the planning system. Because at the moment we have those allocations, but we're not looking at the planning system specifically to it. So I just wondered if you could just explain how planning works when it comes to areas that flood.
When it comes to areas of risk of flooding, the Dorset Council's flooding team will comment on any proposals that they will put down, and they will be amongst the people who will comment on the draft plan when it gets to the next consultation stage. The plan will be submitted to Dorset Council for Dorset Council to undertake the next consultation and pass those comments on to the independent inspector. Dorset Council is also a consultee and will make our comments on that draft so that our comments go to the examiner as well. So the local flooding team will be one of those commenting.
The other technical or procedural questions that might require input from Hilary Jordan. Councillor Young.
Councillor Young, Went Broadway, also resident. I think you can probably hear me without, I used to be a teacher. But there's an awful lot of work. Thank you to the steering committee. There's a lot of technical detail in there. There's a lot of policy. The steering committee can't entirely mark their own policy, so things have to fit in with external frameworks and be externally scrutinised, which I believe is a policy health check that is going on. So I'd be grateful if Councillor Northam could explain something about the progress of the external checking of policy. Thank you.
Thank you. The process is still going on. We've identified the plan and all the supporting stuff to the firm of independent consultants that are being paid for by the locality on the 12th, 14th of November. I asked if they could provide an update in time for this meeting, and I'll just read from their report, which I received at 2:30 this afternoon. Firstly, we have not identified any showstoppers thus far. By this term, I mean issues so significant that they might undermine the plan as a whole. Overall, we consider that the draft plan has been prepared to a sound standard. Its structure and layout are very accessible, and the presentation of policies in colour-coded full-page width boxes is to be commended. The majority of maps are to an appropriate scale with good legibility, albeit a small number of maps do suffer from poor legibility and definition, chief of which is map 16. In that case, they recommend preparation of a set of inset maps of a larger scale. We will further highlight a number of suggested clarifications, revisions to terminology, rewording and corrections to the text of some policies, which we will itemise for you in the health check. However, overall and in sum, I do not think these are so substantive or fundamental to change the nature of the intent of the respective policies. He, at the end, then goes on to say the basic condition statement and the consultation statement look fit for purpose. And finally, he says we'll share the full health check next week, which will give us time as a steering group to update any of the policy recommendations to make them tighter than they currently are. Thank you.
That's a comprehensive reply. So,
After that, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My question is really a follow on from Councillor Taylor's in relation to the Dorset Council's involvement with the flood risk. And I understand from the response given from the officer that Dorset Council will review these flood risks on these sites as part of their consultation process. So my question and a follow-up from that would be, if Dorset Council feels that this site is, any of the sites are unviable due to that flood risk, would they then remove them from the plan prior to going out to referendum? And then what would that do to the effective housing numbers that we propose? Would we be, or the steering group be expected to review new sites to make those numbers up? Or would the plan then move forward with the numbers minus any site that was affected?
No, Hillary.
Thank you very much. Basically, it isn't for Dorset Council to make changes to the plan. The next stage, Dorset Council is a consultee. So if, for example, our team are concerned about flood risk on sites or viability, so there are some outstanding concerns still that have been reported to the steering group. Those will be consultee comments that we will make and will be included with all the other consultee comments and responses to go to the independent examiner. So it will be the independent examiner who may recommend changes to the plan to make it sound. And obviously, as David has said earlier, those changes will need to be accepted by the group. But it's following that examination and those changes made, it's then that the plan would go to referendum. So it's the examiner rather than Dorset Council that would take out sites, but obviously Dorset Council will be commenting and the examiner will take those into account.
and a number of follow-up question.
The number of dwellings, yes, that again, that will be something that the examiner will consider. If Dorset Council thinks that there are problems with sites that will have an impact on the housing numbers, obviously we'll give a view on that, but the examiner will take a view on that ultimately as well.
Councillor Atkinson next, so it's technical procedural questions.
Sorry, I thought we started.
Yeah, we were about to, but well, hang on to, we'll keep your name on the list when we get to the debate. Councillor Dickens, was it a technical or procedural question? Dickens.
Yeah, no, it's technical.
Yes, if you'd like to ask your question.
Right. Whilst I welcome the focus on insulated, Whilst I welcome the focus on insulating homes, transitioning to electric heating, reducing carbon emissions and setting building standards in the Weymouth neighbourhood plan. However, I feel that the policy lacks clear objectives, dedicated funding and a legal framework necessary for effective delivery, making it overly dependent on national planning policies. If the outlined goals are not realistically achievable, I question whether they should be included in the plan. Instead, I believe a more pragmatic approach would be to simplify this part of the policy by relying on established national schemes like the Energy Company Obligation, the Great British Insulation Scheme, and the Boiler Upgrade Scheme, all of which have substantial annual budgets. This way, Weymouth Town Council could focus on more achievable outcomes within the existing planning framework. In the simplest form, what is the current answer to a question? Sorry, current answer to a resident who reads this and wants to air source heat pump and a solar panels? The plan has no answer to this other than look at the current schemes available or pay for it yourself. What value does this plan have to this currently?
Guessing that might be a one we have to wait for the FPPF and national policy. Any comment, Hilary or Colin?
Statement. I think one of the important things to do there, councillors, is to look at the Appendix A, which goes into great detail in setting those targets. They are based on a document that was provided, developed by professionals. It's been taken on by numerous local authorities across the UK and forms the basis for that. And indeed, that document, the Energy Transformation Initiative, has also been adopted by Dorset Council. So very much what we've proposed here is in line with Dorset Council. The only difference is we were a little bit ahead of the game. We suggested it first, and I was pleased to see that Dorset Council came on board. Thank you.
So you've had the opportunity to technical questions. Thank you for coming and answering those. Feel free to leave at this point. We're going to move on to the actual debate, or feel free to stay as well. But the debate will now be among councillors. We won't be into external agencies. This is moving to the debate. So I'll start. My first hand I've seen is we'll give roughly three. I'm not going to stop you after three, but I will ask you to reach a conclusion after three. If you so, Councillor Atkinson, you have the first to take the floor.
The neighbourhood plan supports the young wishing to settle and build families in Weymouth. Housing should be fairly available to everyone. Affordable housing provides an essential foundation to support families, essential workers and local economies. The neighbourhood plan is one important step on that road. I joined the steering group in June 2024. I've been impressed by the thoroughness of its members and the depth of their knowledge. This is not a document of the few. About 50 residents and 20 councillors have been involved along the whole process. Compromises have been necessary, as we've heard, following consultations. There are new developments expected at Lot More to SI and with both Avenue has been withdrawn. Plant viability would be compromised by any further housing target reduction. It is now only 50% of the original number. It does fortunately retain a high percentage of rural homes and a local connection policy. Labour plans for large communities like Weymouth proceed slowly. Only one larger community than us has completed a neighbourhood plan. Others are still in prolonged development. The steering group has addressed many complex issues. Majority voting has been the only way forward for a minority of matters. Paul Barber joined after me and suggested changes that had failed to gain even majority support. However, progress is impossible without change. Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything else. People have told me that they struggle to understand the arguments against new developments like Oliver Foot North. The OS map, current to 1961, shows most developments at that time restricted to just either side of the Preston Road. Other residents since then occupy houses built on formerly extensive greenfield sites. Some of these are built into steep hills, including the highly visible homes on the west side of Jordan Hill. Now some local residents consider it unacceptable to build adjacent to their current homes. Difficult to understand. The neighbourhood plan merely indicates possible new dwellings. It is for the developers to satisfy Dorset Council their intentions overcome all the planning concerns, some of which we've heard tonight. If the neighbourhood plan fails, then developers will progress without its limitations. The northern areas of town, such as White Oliver, will be prioritised because of availability and connectivity. The Picton estate provides evidence of that developer interest. So Weymouth is Dorset's principal conurbation. Developers will have few restrictions if the neighbourhood plan is not in place, if and possibly when the Dorset Council fails to meet its raised housing targets. So let us progress together. I'm just finishing. Please do not make unattainable excellence the enemy of the good. So I would like to propose that we take the recommendation on the document to endorse the neighbourhood plan.
Closing the motion. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Joanna Dickinson. Seconder. I'll just say before we do, we need a seconder for the motion. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Now, Councillor Hope has seconded the motion. He reserves his right to speak till the end. So we move to Councillor Joanna Dickinson.
Thank you, Jim. For the benefit of the members of the public who have kindly attended tonight's full council meeting, I'm Councillor Joanna Dickinson, Preston and Sutton Points Ward. How can I start this? I'm going to go totally a different tack because I want to talk about cemeteries. I have been very vocal, as my fellow councillors will attest, in my condemnation of the lack of care and maintenance in our various cemeteries around the town. When the neighbourhood plan was released a few days ago, I wondered, will they try and put in a proposal on how cemeteries are maintained? And lo and behold, there it was on page 179. I quote, "The cemeteries are maintained by Weymouth Town Council in a sensitive and subtle way, in that they are not excessively manicured." You can say that. Although what is subtle in letting long grass and weeds grow around people's graves is a total mystery to me. It's just a lovely play on words. I continue. Melcombe Cemetery has been designated as a site of nature conservation interest, and Melcombe and White cemeteries have been recognised as living churchyards. By whom? By residents visiting their loved ones' graves, or just yet again another minority group? I would like to see an amendment to this part of the neighbourhood plan to reflect what myself and numerous residents from all over Weymouth have said to me personally and by email about how they would like their cemeteries maintained. I would like to state again, cemeteries need to be tidy, dignified and peaceful places, not jungle messes, which has been my experience in this last few months. Many I spoke to used the words disrespectful and unaffront. I personally think that is an understatement. On further meeting, I noticed a new burial site is required. Dorset Council thought Tumbledown a suitable location, though Weymouth Town Council disagreed. Perhaps if they don't want a burial site, some of that land on Tumbledown could be used to build much needed houses. Thank you.
I think some of that may come up with the environment and services next week, so that will be picked up in a different meeting.
No, point of order, Mr. Mayor. She wants to make an amendment to the wording in the neighbourhood plan.
Oh, okay.
So that's it. I'll second that amendment.
Okay, we'd like to propose your amendment.
We need to propose it.
Do I need to say again, I'd like to sort of make an amendment to that neighbourhood plan?
What is your amendment?
I want what they've said in this document is that, you know, they're not going to maintain the churchyards, you know, and they need to. Even if it was only I don't know, if there was a compromise, that the pathways, and certainly around the roads is clear. Maybe the periphery would be the biodiversity, but they need to be cleared, and they are not being as they used to be.
Point of order, Chairman. It's my understanding we can't change the neighbourhood plan this evening. We can only make recommendations as part of the proposal for the steering group to take on board. Is that correct? We have no power to change the plan. We can just make a recommendation.
Can we bring in, Councillor Northern to answer that, because he's done a lot of thinking about this one. So this is the, reply to Councillor Green's, point of order.
So you can propose a change to the plan. I think that's what Councillor Dickinson is proposing as an amendment to the back and stand. I'd like to understand quite what it is she's saying.
I think it's pretty clear.
And what we have to be careful of in terms of process, because this is a statutory process that we're following for the neighbourhood plan laid down in the NPPF and such like. What we have to be careful is that the changes that we make to the neighbourhood plan are not so great that we have to rerun the Regulation 14 consultation. We've been out and we've consulted on the change. We've not had a noticeable number of comments on this issue. And so we wouldn't be able to justify it as being a resident comment made in the consultation. So it might not stand on that basis. But if there were a major change, we'd go around the Regulation 14 again. I wouldn't count this as a major change if it's carried personally, but I might need to take some advice from Dorset Council.
Could you confirm the page? 179 and 180.
So can I ask Senator T. Smith, come up with the wording of the amendment you'd like to propose?
I'd like it removed so that it can be negotiated, and perhaps something that the residents should be actually aware of, that, you know, we are not maintaining our cemeteries to the standard that we used to.
I'll take advice from the clerk as whether that is a minor amendment or a major amendment.
The complete removal of the policy I would regard as a major amendment, but I'm prepared to take advice from Councillor Morgan, who has researched this.
And Councillor Lord, would you view that as a minor or major?
So there's a split in the way the plan is produced between the policy statement. There's a split between the policy statement and the supporting evidence. What Councillor Dickinson has commented on is the supporting evidence. The policy statement says proposals for new burial grounds will be supported in principle, provided they are accessible and located reasonably close to the existing built-up areas, in locations where local residential amenity can be protected and meets the requirements of the Environment Agency, because you can't just bury people anywhere. And the supporting text describes the current practice within within Weymouth Town Council. I would suggest that that's a matter that should be brought up to Weymouth Town Council and not in the neighbourhood plan. If that were passed at next week's Environmental and Services meeting, then I think we could update the neighbourhood plan to make that change.
Would you like Councillor Dickinson?
Well, I mean, talking about the burial site, that was just a sort of added thing that I sort of read about. I want the removal of the policy, that whoever is removal of the policy as it is for cemeteries and as it stands at the moment. They are not being maintained to a standard that anybody and any family would expect of, their graves. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, the question I can see from, I'll bring in other councillors in the second, is whether there's a matter we've sorted out now, or whether it's one from Environment and Services next week within a different context.
Fair enough. I won't go away. No. I should keep on about this.
Yes, I hand over to the clerk to give some advice.
If I can bring just a little bit of clarity to this discussion, the point that is currently behind me, 11.72 gives a statement of the current service level as determined by Weymouth Town Council. It doesn't bind the Town Council into that same level of service in the future. This is being discussed at the Environment and Services Committee next week, at which point the Council may change how it manages the cemeteries, which is perfectly in line with the policy statement for this section of the plan.
Just check if that's a satisfactory reply. That's if I say withdraw the amendment. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I'm actually reading this out on behalf of another councillor, Brian Hayter, who is unfortunately ill at the moment. He says, I would like to speak on the site proposed between Kestrel View and Beverley Road. Having lived in this part of Littlemore for nearly 40 years, I have a good local and historical knowledge of the area. The proposed site is located at the bottom of the valley from a steep hillside between Littlemore and the fields of Lawton Meadows, down to the Redlands and Logmore area. During heavy rainfall and ground saturation water drains down from the hillside onto the Littlemore side into the proposed site and into the culvert at the bottom. This being the culvert that runs under the relief road into the Finches and then onwards. Despite a programme of works organised several years ago by my ward councillor, Councillor Leary, this area is still highly susceptible to flooding. The culvert cannot already cope with the excess water that then fills up the basin at the bottom of the proposed site, with water levels at times reaching close to the back gardens of properties along both Fairfield Close and the Doves. Another drainage runoff on Beverley Road itself is already earmarked for housing and taking up even more flood absorption water in the area. If we build on these two vital open spaces, the water that runs down off the hillside won't simply disappear. It has to go somewhere, and building along this already struggling culvert will add to an already major issue to this often forgotten part of Weymouth. The site has many mature trees, which, as Councillor Atkinson has previously pointed out, Littlemore already has less than an average amount of. The area is also frequently used for recreational purposes by members of the local community. I therefore cannot support any plan with this site included in it. That ends Councillor Hayter's remarks. I'd like to add that I was recently in Spain near Valencia during the floods, and I'd like to tell this council it was actually a lovely sunny day when all those people were killed. The water came off the hills. It was not raining in Valencia. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Dickinson.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we have had 5 days to look through this neighbourhood plan. We are then expected to pass judgment and make decisions which affect our town for the next 14 years. Having waited some 10 months for the last engagement results, I find no real analysis of the engagement. 10 months we had to wait for it. Back in January, Dorset Council said the plan was not viable, deliverable, or achievable. I am just really beginning to see what they mean. It would be impossible to pick out every element of this plan that is unachievable. But 2 points give me a great concern. The first is the steering group's obsession with wanting to build houses in totally inappropriate areas. The old tip is a point in question. On a Homes meeting with Dorset Council, planners, they said that no building can take place on this land due to flood risk, soil contamination, and sea level runoff. White Oliver Farm is outside the defined building boundaries,
and the risk of flooding is worse than the Budmouth Brackendown area. There appears to be no strategic environment assessment, which has to be referenced and referred to. How can we vote for something we have not seen? The plan has many good points, so with a few improvements, I am sure that a satisfactory plan can be reached. As it stands, I will not be supporting the neighbourhood plan. We are also being asked tonight to vote on a local connection policy. I would ask that this policy be deferred so that a task and finish group can be set up to look at this. I am sure that putting it in with the neighbourhood plan, many councillors will perhaps not have time to read it thoroughly and digest this new policy. This could have far-reaching effects to housing for local people who do not meet its criteria, perhaps because of age and what job they do. All workers are key to our local economy and country. And I would just like to ask if Councillor Harris and Councillor Northern and Mr Cheeseman of the steering group would like to offer an apology to the Conservative councillors and the Preston residents who they called liars. Are you willing to give that apology, Councillor Harris, Councillor Northern and Mr Cheeseman?
The chair, we're not a matter for the council. We're here to debate the plan, so if we can stick.
It's all over the plan.
If we can stick to, yeah, if we can stick to debating the plan among councillors without making it personal.
Would you like to read what he said?
No. We're not debating that. So I'd like to give every councillor the opportunity to speak. We won't be answering questions. I suggest that other councillors may come in later and answer some of the points made. However, I'd like to everyone to have the opportunity to have their input. So the next person I can see is Councillor O'Leary.
Yes, I never thought I'd be the more mellow of the two Preston councillors in my comments. Basically, it's repeatedly said tonight that the final say of this plan will be at a referendum by the people of Weymouth. As the plan stands, this plan will fail at referendum. I was going to make a big speech about why Colliver isn't suitable and why Beverley Road isn't suitable and the other aspects of the plan that aren't. I think we've heard from the residents. I think there's a number of unanswered questions that I don't think we're going to be able to answer today. Councillor Norton's very clued up on this, but I think there's even stuff on here that he's not going to be able to capture. I think the way this meeting has been handled in terms of a very slow filter through of facts and documents over the past week has been incredibly unhelpful. I think the time we've been given to go through this massive document that will decide the future of Weymouth for years has not been given enough time. I mean, who on earth is going to digest all of this in the space of less than a week, more or less? If this gets to referendum, I can guarantee you, and I'm not very good at getting things that I want passed, but I'll tell you something, some of you will know I'm very, very good at stopping things I don't like. If this gets to referendum, I can assure you that my residents in Liverpool Preston will turn out to vote because they had a reason to get out and vote. I'll tell you something, in Westham, in Lane House, in Wyke, the reason for them voting is going to be a little bit less because a lot of people don't know what the neighbourhood plan is still, they're not as motivated. I want to see a neighbourhood plan passed, I really do. Colin in particular has done some fantastic things. There's a lot of good things in this plan, but at the minute, both sides of the anti and the pro-neighbourhood plan side are about to enter in what the Cold War term was, MAD, mutually assured destruction. We're going to end up with a plan that doesn't have public support, going to referendum, being defeated at referendum, and we're back to stage one. Therefore, I cannot support Councillor Hope's proposal to move this forward. I would instead ask, oh, sorry, Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Hope seconded, sorry. I would therefore cannot support Councillor Atkinson's proposal, and I think that this item should be deferred and looked at in more detail once we have a chance to go through the documentation. One thing I must raise though,
is for this plan to go forward, I think we must look at the way the neighbourhood plan is being organised. I think we have to take councillors out of the steering group process. I'm really sorry, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Axon and others, but we have to hand this to the residents. We have to take out some of the venom that has been injected over the years by, I'm going to say, all sides. And I'll be quite honest about that. And I think others have to be honest about that as well. But for this to move forward, we have to be realistic about whether this will pass referendum, and it will not pass referendum as it is. Therefore, I cannot support the proposal, and if it fails, I will therefore push for a deferral. We can't, members of the steering group can't even agree on this. So how on earth are members of the residents of Weymouth going to agree on this plan? So therefore, I'm asking for us to look at this sensibly, level-headed, and let's get a plan we can all get behind. Thank you very much.
Civil. Good evening, all. Councillor David Civil, Lodmore Ward. I hear what Councillor O'Leary says, but the reality is that we're not going to agree on a plan, ever. No one in this room is going to agree with everyone else on a neighbourhood plan. It's impossible. I suspect councillors, 3 of us are unlikely to agree on a plan, every item of the detail. But by its very nature, a neighbourhood plan is a compromise. And I can see a group of people here looking at me that clearly very much do not like 1 or 2 specific elements of it. I can understand that. I'm not sure I would be desperate for people to be building in a greenfield site close to where I live. There aren't really any greenfield sites close to where I live because I live in Lockmore, but you get the idea. So that was my first point. Going back to some of the public participation points, I think there were some very good arguments made both for and against. I hope we don't vote in political blocks as we usually do. As far as I'm aware, we don't. Certainly, I'm not whipped, so maybe other parties are. That's not something I'm aware of. We're a town council. That's a glorified parish council these days. We're not Weymouth and Borthwick Borough Council. Our budgets are a lot smaller. We're responsible between us for the whole town, not just the wards we are elected in. So yeah, absolutely, we have to look out for the views of everyone across the town, not just those that voted for us. Even more so the people that didn't vote for anyone, to be perfectly honest, because that is the majority, let's be honest. Yeah, I'm also not convinced that closing the public participation with a threat to the councillors is either necessary or indeed helpful, but there we go. As I understand it, our task this evening is to recommend that the plan is taken on to the next democratic stage, not to arbitrate on whether or not all or some or specific elements within it are acceptable to us or to the council in general. Overall, I believe that having a plan for all of Weymouth would, on balance, prove to be a lot better ongoing than having no plan at all. So I'm minded to vote for it.
Thank you. Next, let's come to this.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is probably the most important debate we've had as the town council since it was created in 2019, and it will replace one of the last vestiges of the old borough council. The neighbourhood plan is what it says in the title, a plan for the local neighbourhood drawn up by local residents. Yes, it's not, as Councillor David Civil said, it's not going to be a plan that everybody agrees with. It can't be. But more importantly, I'd like to contradict some of the points that Councillor O'Leary made. We don't need to shove this to one side now to get further consultation. We're getting further consultation after Christmas. We're getting consultation not from my Weymouth neighbourhood plan steering group. They have got Dorset Council running the system then. They will have 6 weeks of consultation where the points that many of you have made today can be remade to an independent examiner who will look at those points. This is democracy. It's where we take things forward and look at things in more depth. We don't have to take instant decisions through emotions that are presently in this room. So let us think about what's going to happen. It's going to go to 6 weeks of consultation. Dorset Council have said that they're putting in their consultation bits as well. Then the points that the independent examiner makes will go back to the steering group to be looked at, to be said, and he will tell them what changes he thinks should be made. It's up to them then to make those changes, or maybe risk the independent examiner saying you can't put this out to referendum. That's the position that we're in. If it then goes out to referendum, it will be because it has been approved by an independent examiner. So let us go down this process. Let us pass this on to the next stage so that we can get that bit of independence in it that some of you seem to want. You all have your chance of saying your views again, and then we can see what is possible and what's not possible. We've got a fantastically good town plan for the whole of Weymouth. Let's not forget that either. We've got to be able to say this is a plan that the whole population of Weymouth will benefit from. Some people may suffer a little bit, some people will benefit from it. They always do when change happens, but let us make sure that we've got the right thing by going down this pathway that is laid out before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The next on my list is Councillor Northern. Bear in mind, this is your one opportunity.
Thank you. I cannot respond tonight directly to all the comments that have been made. We, members of the steering group, met with Councillor Dickinson and Councillor Leary a few weeks ago. At that time, I offered to come and talk to the Preston residents. I'm still making that offer to come and talk to the Preston residents along with fellow members of the steering group to address the points that have been made. I'm going to just pick on one or two of them because it's been mentioned more than once. There was a quote of Dorset Council said the viability wasn't viable. The plan was not viable. That is true, that at one stage there was a letter from Dorset Council to us on the first draft of the viability plan that said they were dissatisfied with the way the plan was being conducted. The viability testing had been carried out because it hadn't addressed all the policies in the plan. The new viability report that's been published addresses all the policy and says whether they have an impact on the viability. It also picks up on a change that Dorset Council has made to the amount of money that is charged for nutrient neutrality for all development. And that's made a significant difference to the viability assessments. If I just, that's good. If I just quote the £100 on page 95 of the plan, it quotes that Wycoliver Farm is affordable, that's including the is viable, including the 20% profit, and leaves a margin of 500k. That's a significant number. If you look at the policies, you haven't had a chance to read all the documents. You have the pre-submission plan. We've published a list of the policy changes and the non-policy changes to try and make that easier for you in looking at the changes to the plan. Within the Wycoliver Farm policy, we've included additional statements to respond to the concerns about land instability, flood risk, and such like. And these will be picked up by the developer when he comes forward with a plan to Dorset Council. The fact that it's allocated as a site does not mean it will get built. What it means is that it's guidelines on what needs to be addressed when it comes forward as a proposal from a developer. One other thing on the matter with the Kestrel View Road, the culvert is significant. Again, the policy, the planning application will have to address how the water is managed. The building is not on top of the culvert, and in fact, the owner of the land where the culvert runs is the same owner as this site that's proposed for development, and he has said that he's happy that that land is made over to local green space for that area. Currently, it's not.
quite a conclusion.
Right, so I'm happy to meet with the residents of Preston in a meeting, a formal meeting at some stage or other, to go through the points. That's been the case. Thank you.
Okay, two minutes. Next speaker is councillor Clifford.
So I'm very much on listening mode, as I'm one of the councillors who will sit on the cabinet that makes a decision at Dorset Council, or rather makes its recommendations at a meeting in due course. What I'm really interested by, I think some really valid points have been raised, and I completely understand how Councillor Northern can't possibly be expected to answer all the points that come through. I do have some of those questions at the back of my mind. I'd like to bring those to the forward front of my mind, and I'll be able to do that in Dorset Council. What I'm really looking for is a little bit of assurance that residents' concerns that are being raised will be addressed, and there will be some form that they will understand, will be written in such a way that they understand what the answers to the points raised will be. And can you now, David, if you're able to answer this, give us a little bit more insight into what the independent process is? When you say there'll be the independent planning officer will look at it, what will they do? Do they have a yes or no, or is it recommendations? How does it come back, and how do we adapt any of the conversations they have, the points they make, into a final document?
I think, David, Councillor Norton's had his chance, so we'll just hang on to that one. I think some of it may have been answered already by Hilary Jordan. We'll just let everyone have their questions and then opportunity to contribute. Councillor Jill Taylor.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Taylor, West and West. I'm also the same as Councillor Clifford. I'm a unitary councillor. I'm a member cabinet. First of all, I've got a question I'd like to ask of the chair. Can we take the two recommendations separately, please? I don't know whether we'd have to vote on that or how it would work, but I'll just talk and take it from there. I welcome housing allocations within this plan and very much welcome the numbers proposed to support them. We are in desperate need of housing in Weymouth, and we cannot get away from that. I want to speak on behalf of the people who don't attend these meetings and don't come to planning meetings and don't speak up for themselves. We've heard from Rob Cheeseman and Laura Wood about their consultation with young people. This is a plan for them. This isn't a plan for me. By the time most of this plan is done, I'll be dead and gone. This is a plan for them. Just looking at our current issues, we've had references to the housing waiting lists. They're currently over 6,500 on them. There's actually 22 households currently in bed and breakfast that haven't got a home. And we've got over 100 in temporary accommodation waiting for homes. There are also people surfacing. We need homes, and I would urge Mr. Bailey to go back and ask for clarification on these numbers, because the numbers literally change on a daily basis. And I'm happy to talk why there are people on that list who haven't got a local connection, but that's not appropriate for this evening. I own my own house. I'm really, really lucky and really, really grateful. And I suspect that many of the people here do also own their houses. But many in Weymouth don't. They can't. They are just getting by. And this isn't their fault. These are good, honest, decent people who need a home. I'm committed to green space, and you can see that from my record. So it's not about me not wanting to build everywhere. I do value very much green space. And just for the people who are talking about flooding, within my ward is Curtis Fields. In 2012, I walked across there in a pair of wellies, and the water was coming over the top of my wellies. That is now built on, and actually there's far less flooding now because of the mitigation that's been put in by the planning. And also the houses in the area don't flood now because of that. There are areas they haven't sorted out yet, but that's a work in progress. And thankfully, I trust our planners far more than I do in Spain, but the Spanish ones. So I am actually very saddened about removal of the signs. However, I believe in democracy, as Councillor Sybil said. I'm not going to come to a conclusion yet because I'm going to speak on the second part. It's my job as a councillor, and our jobs as councillors, to put both sides of the argument to the public, not to take a fixed point. I will be going to my residents, I'll be talking to them and putting both sides of the argument. And yes, I'm going to support this. Mainly because I think on balance is good. I just want to talk about the allocations policy quite briefly, and I will not be supporting this, which is why I want it voted on separately. Dorset Council, as a principal council, has a duty to have and maintain an allocations policy. There are a number of reasons that Weymouth shouldn't have its own policy. It would almost be unworkable. Just as an example, we're looking at 12 years residency. We have enough problems trying to get people to demonstrate that they've been here for 2 years. 12 years is going to be impossible. If you've got a young person, it's not going to be possible to do it. We've got new builds allocated for young people, which is great, brilliant. But the thing is, we have a lot of properties coming to the affordable section that aren't new. So how do we deal with those? I think there's a better mechanism to do this. We will be reviewing the allocations policy within the next 12 months. I've just signed the papers off for that to go forward. I think a lot of the ethos is what is within here can go into the Dorset Council's allocations policy, which is the legal document. And I think it's better placed within that than within the neighbourhood plan. And for that reason, I will be voting against this, the second part. And that's why I wanted to take it separately. Thank you. And thank you for your indulgence.
Encourage councillors to keep this, that keeps it fair for everyone if we can all keep the same times. I appreciate that you will store it as 2 items. So, before we move to, we've got councillors Brown, Surrey and Weller. Before we go to them, can I go back to Councillor Atkinson?
John, please. Can I go back and see if the proposer and the seconder of the motion would be prepared to split them?
I'm happy, Chair.
I'm happy, yes, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Bell.
Councillor Bell, representing Longmore, Weymouth Town Council and Bradford and Dorset Council. Firstly, I want to say well done and thank you to all the members of our community who engaged in this process, particularly the steering group who stepped up and gave so much of their time and effort to produce this thorough plan. I particularly want to thank Laura Wood for ensuring that the youth voice was considered and included. Secondly, having read the documentation, I'm pleased to see confirmation that this community-driven plan seeks to protect and enhance our natural and built environment and ensure that our communities can thrive long into the future. I'm delighted that the plan identifies environmental targets which provide guidance to developers in addressing concerns regarding the climate and ecological emergency. Furthermore, the plan goes a long way to protect green gaps, including transferring ownership of 32 hectares of land to the Lawton Valley Nature Park to enable habitat enrichment. The plan also protects 49 local green spaces, totaling 60 hectares, and seeks to enhance the green linkages between communities. This plan is not just about crucial houses being built, but protecting our vital green spaces as well. Finally, I'm happy to vote for this evening's recommendation as written in the agenda, as it is important that this community-led neighbourhood plan goes on to the next stage of this democratic process, which includes further consultation and ultimately a referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Bang.
Thank you. I'm Louise Brown. I'm a member for Radical and Southwell. So I want to say thank you to the steering group. There's been many man-hours on formulating this plan, and it has been an open and democratic poll process. It has been open for members of the public and councillors to take part in. So I'm really pleased with that. I'd like to speak for the plan. I think the most important thing to remember is what we're not voting for tonight is planning permission for the land at White Gulliver Farm. What we're voting for is that this plan, which has been democratically worked on, goes forward to the next stage. I'd like to reassure everybody that as and when any planning permission for White Gulliver Farm goes to Dorset Council, it will be voted on by the Southern and Western, or Western and Southern Planning Committee. And that will happen with or without this plan. As we know, the land at White Gulliver is already owned by developers. And the developers are going to be applying for planning permission whether or not this plan goes forward. So I don't think we need to not be sidetracked. We need to keep our eyes on what we're voting for, which is the neighbourhood plan, which is the balance of issues across Weymouth and the surrounding area. And that's what we're voting for tonight. And all we're voting for is for it going forward to the next stage. So I think we should all vote in favour of the plan.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Surrey.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Mike Surrey representing Broadwell. I will be brief because I think some of my points have actually already been covered. I speak in support of the plan. Yes, we have to protect green spaces, but I think a key driver, I'm repeating what's been said before, particularly Councillor Taylor, a key driver is affordable homes to meet the needs of local people and to meet the needs of key workers. We mustn't get into the situation. I know there are firemen in London who live in Exeter and commute because of the price of housing in London. And, you know, it's a ridiculous situation that we mustn't replicate down here. I'm pleased with the local connection policy that obviously favours those who already live within the area, and the requirement that new dwellings must be considered as principal homes. There have been some debate about figures. The figures that I've got were that in August 2024, there were over 1,000 applications to the housing register for homes in Weymouth, which is about a 5 times increase since September 2023. So that's the need is screaming at us. I'm aware this might be driven slightly by the Renters Reform Bill, which, although we need that as well, has obviously unintended consequences. I think it's also good that, from what I've heard from my residents, that it has an awful lot of local support. And I'd also like to echo the fact that I think Michael Bevin described it as balanced, and Mr. Cheeseman and Graham Perry said that it's better to have a plan than no plan at all. Otherwise, we leave ourselves open to developers who can be very canny about coming in when there's a vacuum to fill.
Councillor Weller.
Thank you, Councillor Kate Weller, White and Rodwell. I've scribbled over this so much, you're going to need to bear with me, because what I'm trying to do is to address the comments that the public made, and I'm really grateful to you for that. I speak with over 20 years of experience as a member of planning committees, sometimes chairman of planning committees. I'm currently working at Dorset Council on the local plan for Dorset. The need for a robust plan has always been vital, and it remains more so than ever. Without this, the area is prey, as other people have stated, to every developer who has an eye on speculation. This plan will be critical in the creation of the Dorset local plan. It's not in isolation, these things dovetail, they're important, and they're seen as important. Laura, thank you, Laura. Laura spoke really powerfully about her engagement with our young people, and this plan is for them. It's for those people that we are making this deliberation now, and all of us here tonight, but every resident in this town needs to think about that when they engage as this progresses. This plan is at its early stages. That's probably depressing for those of you who've been working on it for 5 years, but it is still in its early stages. This is baby steps. It's got an awful lot further to go. It will be tweaked. Some things will be told really aren't viable. They were aspirational, but they aren't viable. Other things will come forward as much stronger than we thought they would be. But unless we continue with this process now, we'll be having this conversation. Well, as Councillor Taylor said, she'll be dead and gone. I certainly will be. So let's not delay it. There are things that I'm not entirely happy with. There are things that I'm very happy with, and some of those, and I will say this, is most of us. I'm looking around. There are lots of grandmas and grandpas here. Most of us would like our children and our grandchildren near us, if that were possible, but only if they can afford good, proper homes and good, meaningful, fulfilling jobs. Prosperity is what this town needs. It always had. It's been in the doldrums. We need to lift it out of those doldrums. And this plan is a step on the way to us achieving that. So when we go further down this process, and we must go further down this process, in my view, as we go down it, and as people get the opportunity to engage further, I do hope they will do so. And when they get to go out and vote, I hope that threats from this person or that person will mean nothing. They'll go out and vote, not necessarily for themselves, but for their children and their grandchildren, because the world needs to be thinking forward. It really does need that. Yeah, that's all I need. Take part in it. This is a stage of processes. We're at the beginning. Let's all join in the race and get to the end.
Thank you. Try to give everyone the chance to speak at least once. Do I have any of the councillors that have not yet spoken? Councillor Toft. Councillor Toft.
Councillor Toft from White Sands, Green councillor, so really you think I was going to be fighting tooth and nail for no space to be, free space to be built on. But I have young children and I would like my children to live and grow up here and work here. And right at this moment, I can't see how they can, because we don't have work opportunities for them. We're not attracting people to this town. They look at the cost of the housing and they go, oh no, can't afford to live there. So we're not attracting talent, we're not attracting business. We need affordable houses. With enough affordable houses, hopefully it will have an impact on the private housing market, and maybe some of the prices will come down to a reasonable level. And I am really, really pleased that we're going to stop second homes, try and stop second homes, because it really, really saddens me when parts of Weymouth are dead in the winter because there's so many second homes. And yet you know there are people crying out for somewhere decent to live. It's not right, and I would like to support this plan. I have been concerned by some of the concerns of the residents that we've heard tonight, but I hope as councillors, especially the Dorset councillors, you will follow up and make sure when it gets to the stage of putting safeguards in, that those safeguards are in so that some of these concerns are addressed. And a developer will go ahead if they can. And if by having a plan in place, we can stop speculative development that will be to the detriment of our town, then I think that's a good thing. And I'm going to support this plan. Thank you.
I'll leave this to a vote very shortly. Councillor Leary has a point of order.
May I request a recorded vote, please, Chairman?
Second for that proposal.
Sixteen, keep your hands up, 17, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22.
All those against,
One.
abstentions. Okay, that's carried, so it would be a recorded vote.
Could I come back with a couple of?
I think the way I've run this is I wanted to give everyone the opportunity to speak. I'm aware that this could become very much a battle between sides, and it can also, every page on this report is massive. Every page of it took a whole evening of debate amongst us. We could debate this every night for months and still not be happy. So I think we do need to move to a vote. Everyone's had a chance to speak.
Well,
Councillor Langley is still waiting. Everyone's had a chance to speak. I don't think we'll ever get to the stage where we're all happy. So we have to, at some stage, vote. There's still, unless it's a point of order.
well, there's been a lot of comment about engagement and taking note of what residents say. Why did the steering group take out 2 questions that were asked?
I don't think that's a point of order. So
why did they take them out?
If you can
disregard their comments.
Everyone's had their chance to speak. It's now Councillor Hope's chance to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I hope you may indulge me because something I want to clarify here this evening, or a point of clarity before I speak, if I may. And I'm not asking Councillor Northam to speak much. I just want a yes or no answer, Councillor Northam. Lodmore Tip was mentioned as an area of development. My recollection from rereading the plan is that's now been removed. Is that correct?
No.
So it's still in the plan for housing development?
No.
No. But thank you very much for that point of clarity, both my understanding and that. So, thank you very much. So Lodmore Tip no longer in that development. And I think that's the point. Not for housing development. Thank you very much. That's a good point of clarity. Thank you. Because it is sometimes confusing. We've had pages and pages and pages to digest, and even earlier on, Councillor Dickinson, you may have alluded that it was there for housing development when you spoke. So I'm really pleased to understand that, and I think we've got to remember here tonight, Council, we are here to not decide the plan. We are here to decide to move this forward to Dorset Council for the next stage of public engagement. That's the recommendation, I believe, is above me in A, and that's what we're being asked to do. Now, I am a father of 2, as many of you know, and a lot of this plan means a lot to me because I'm thinking of my children's future and my own future. Like Councillor O'Leary, I'm blessed with youth, and we're going to be in this town for a long time. And I'm sure we'll be debating in this chamber for many, many years to come, Councillor O'Leary.
I'm sure your colleagues are delighted by that.
So, I have this real interest in this plan because it's my future, it's my children's future. But do I agree with everything that's in this plan? Councillor Northam, no, I don't. But I believe in democracy, and I'm prepared now to give these residents that have turned up this evening their chance to say again on this plan, speak on this plan again, as well as the residents that haven't previously engaged in this plan. Let's move it forward to the next stage of public consultation, because we need a plan. It was said before, it's better to have a plan than no plan. But I don't think we've fully grasped the benefits here. We're talking about affordable housing. We're prioritising the creation for our local needs, protecting our environment, economic growth. That's something that's not really been muttered tonight in the chamber during the discussion here, but we're focused on economic growth for Weymouth. We're talking about community well-being, health well-being, bringing communities together, sustainability. And the big one, of course, is our community infrastructure levy. Currently get 15% on any bills for local needs. a neighbourhood plan will see an increase to 25%. That will give us more money to spend on local community projects to support our local communities. So I do believe the comments that no, a plan is better than no plan. But I believe in democracy and I believe in moving this forward, which is why I was happy to second the proposal. And once again, I'd like to extend my thanks to every member of the steering group, those that are still on there, those that have been involved. I'd like to thank all the residents that have turned up tonight to make sure that we've actually listened to your comments. We understand your comments. We can then digest them further as we go into the next round of consultation, and then it goes to examination before it's adopted. Because this is a community plan, it needs the community involvement, and I'm pleased to see the most well-attended meeting of Weymouth Town Council on this subject. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to second and happy to go to the vote.
Right, so we now move to the vote. It's going to be a recorded vote. The clerk will read your name out and then come out clearly yes or no, or abstain. So the vote we're voting on in two parts. The first one is A, endorse the submission of the draft neighbourhood plan together with supporting papers to Dorset Council for further consultation, independent examination and referendum. So part A. Town clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So if you could clearly state whether you're voting for, against or abstaining, I very much appreciate it. We'll go through this alphabetically as the Chair has said. Councillor Howard Atkinson.
Yes, A, yes. Yes.
4.
Yeah.
Councillor Matt Bell.
4.
Councillor Louise Bown. 4. Councillor David Sybil.
4.
Councillor Simon Clifford.
4.
Councillor Beverly Day.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Dickens.
Against.
Councillor Joanna Dickinson.
Against.
Councillor Peter Dickinson.
Against.
Councillor Alex Furman.
4.
Councillor Lee Harmsworth. 4. Councillor David Harris.
4. Listen to you.
Councillor Brian Painter is absent. Councillor Ryan Hope.
4.
Councillor Caroline Nickinson.
Against.
Councillor David Northern.
4.
Councillor Louis O'Leary.
Against.
Councillor John Orrell.
4.
Councillor Mike Surrey.
4.
Councillor Jill Taylor. 4. Councillor Thomas Taylor.
4.
Councillor Helen Toft.
4.
Councillor Kate Weller.
4.
Councillor Claire Williams.
Against.
Councillor Tim Young.
4.
So let me live down halfway. Wait a second.
So is 17 votes.
That's democracy.
So is 17 votes for. That is recommendation A is carried. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, then go move to the second vote.
Sorry.
Second vote is approves the creation of Weymouth Local Connections Policy in support of the plan.
Thank you, Chair. Just to shake things up and make sure everybody's awake and give people a different chance of the order. We're going to take this in reverse alphabetical order. Once again, councillors, if you could clearly state whether you are for, against or abstaining, recommendation B as is up on the screen. Councillor Tim Young.
4.
Councillor Claire Williams.
Against.
Councillor Kate Weller.
Abstain.
Councillor Helen Toft.
Abstain.
Councillor Thomas Taylor.
4.
Councillor Jill Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Mike Surrey.
Abstain.
Councillor John Orrell.
4.
Councillor Louis O'Leary.
Against.
Councillor David Northern.
4.
Councillor Caroline Nickinson.
Against.
Councillor Ryan Hope.
Against.
Councillor David Harris.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Harmsworth.
Against.
Councillor Alex Furman.
Against.
Councillor Peter Dickinson.
Against.
Councillor Joanna Dickinson.
Against.
Councillor Stephen Dickens.
Against.
Councillor Beverly Day.
Against.
Councillor Simon Clifford.
Against.
Councillor David Sybil.
Against.
Councillor Louise Bown.
Against.
Councillor Matt Bell.
Against.
Councillor Howard Atkinson.
4.
So with 15 votes against, Chairman, recommendation A is defeated, B, sorry, B.
Oh, you just made my day.
Thank you very much, members of the council. Thank you, members of the public, for your patience. We'll have a 5-minute intermission now to let people have a comfort break. It's a strict 5 minutes. We're back here at 22. Thank you.